Hi, it's Joe here, ZL1PNY, and on the bench today we have the auto tuner, an Icom one, the internal tuner from a 756 Pro 3. And one of the things that, well, the tuner doesn't seem to tune. Every now and again it will work, but it's more hit and miss. Maybe 1 in 20 times it might settle on a tune position. And what we noticed, we're checking the motors out, and there are no limit stops on the motors. So to explain, you can see on the actual frame you've got these two metal extrusions here, and there should be a little metal thing slipped onto the motor, and they are set such that on this side it's maximum capacitance and on this side it's minimum capacitance, and that occurs within a 180-degree swing. And the reason that it won't work without those is that there is no reference point. Now, to explain, the software actually is written such that if the motor is turned clockwise, it increases the capacitance, and if the motor turns anti-clockwise, it decreases capacitance. But without a limit stop, the next time it wants to increase capacitance, even if it's at minimum, it would start to rotate it clockwise, and basically you end up then with decreasing capacitance when the software is thinking it's increasing it, and it starts doing odd things like switching in extra capacitance on the relays and stuff like that. So now we've been onto Icom, and there's no parts available for that. It's probably a part they've never actually stocked, because it's not likely. I don't know why the one's missing off this particular tuner, I don't know. The owner says he's never really done anything more than take the lid off. We've emptied the radio, there's nothing inside it. It's not that it could fall off anyway, because it sits on the motor shaft. So what we did is we drew one up and got the old trusty CNC to make one. Now this is much thicker material, it's a piece of PCB type material. So whether that will work, whether there's enough shaft on the motor to work or not, I'm not sure. But these things sit on the shaft like that. Trying to do it through the camera. And as the motor rotates, it comes up against these stops to prevent more than 180-degree rotation. Now the other thing is there's a reference starting position, which a lot of people don't know. So looking at the motor that way into the shaft, clockwise rotation should increase capacitance. So when you're putting this thing back together, you fully mesh the tuner, the variable capacitor, and then you set the cam on the motor so that it's resting on this stop and fit the motor. And then when it wants minimum capacitance, the motor would rotate round until the cam hits this stop, and that actually prevents the motor from going too far, even though the motor is being pulsed by the software. I think the software must detect the current going into the motor and know that it's come up against a hard stop. So hopefully with the new part fitted and we get it all back together, we should see whether we've cured the non-tuning problem. The other thing is the motor. You see that's a different motor than this one. There's the two in comparison, they're not quite the same. We put a new motor on because the gears in the one which didn't have the end stops were chewed up. Again, that's not normal, usually they just come unstuck, but this actually had worn ends on each tooth on the middle gear, and they weren't quite meshing correctly. So that's a 756 internal auto tuner. They say you learn something new every day, and that's something that I hadn't really considered. What the end stops do, it's not something you delve into, unless like this one it comes in without them. So with that we'll get it back together and we'll see what happens. Okay, so we got the new cam in place, and just going through the buttons. This is one top band. That's same tuned, 80 meters. Tuned, 40 meters. Tuned, try 10 megahertz. Tuned, 14 megahertz. 18. Oh, pressing the wrong button. Tuned, 21 megahertz. 24. Tuned, 28. Tuned, and 50 megahertz. Tuned. So it's all down to, well, the motor was knackered, but it's all down to having no reference point. Quite likely the reference point was set. I don't know how it would have been working, because the software expects to turn the motor clockwise and get increasing capacitance. So when the three detectors you've got forward, reflected and phase say it needs more capacitance, it would turn the motor clockwise, but without a reference that could be decreasing the capacitance, because it's gone through 180 degrees. So yeah, I'm going to leave it on the bench on soak while I go and have some lunch, but to all intents and purposes it looks to be done. So I'll put a diagram on the web as well. The factory have a startup position diagram for the tuner, although it's not in the service manual. I suspect that the factory and possibly the dealers have better service manuals than we can get on a download. Not sure why. The Icom manuals used to be very good, but I think a lot of it is to do with how easily the technology can be copied by other countries, shall we say, without naming names, and so the information you get these days is a bit scant. So this is Joe, Z01PNY, thanks for watching.